if you're going to do one thing today, set one intention for today, I would say spend some time telling yourself that you love yourself and really internalizing that and really kind of speaking to the core of who you are, trying to embrace the entirety of who you are and saying, I love you.
Hello, you're listening to the State of Potentiality podcast. You lost your job.
A sudden death.
Surprise! You're pregnant!
Any of those sound familiar?
It's out of the blue and completely out of your control.
Still, the next move is yours. The State of Potentiality dives down deep, navigating whatever life throws your way.
And using that to come out the other side bigger, better, and stronger. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
What will you make of it?
Hurt, pain, fear, worthlessness. When you're experiencing trauma, you're just surviving. But what happens when you come out on the other side and you're free to fully live again? And how do you move towards love, care, and connection? Today we'll be hearing Sarah talk with Ken Dryfhout, youth worker and father, about healing from trauma and learning to love yourself. My name's Brad Reed, and you're listening to the State of Potentiality podcast. And now, here's Sarah's conversation with Ken Dryfhout.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the State of Potentiality podcast. We have Ken Dryfhout with us today, and he is a youth worker in Mississauga called The Dam, but he is also a dad, and he's really spending a lot of time building community with youth in many different ways. And he's here to share his story today. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Ken, thank you for joining us. And I just want to start off by asking you, so what really started with just the passion of working with youth in the first place?
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Passion of working with youth. That's a great question. I've been working with teenagers almost since I was one myself. And I think that in my own experience of being a youth, it was just so full of different moments of turmoil, and youth can just be such an intense time, intense emotions, working things out intensely. Everything feels like it's the biggest thing in the world at times. And so I think in my early 20s, I just kind of made a shift where one of my sisters suggested that maybe I should think about working with youth. I was going to university at the time for theater, and for some reason, just that little comment stuck with me. And I think that we were in London, Ontario at the time. And by the time that we were done our hour drive, I had already decided, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. So it was a pretty dramatic shift. And yeah, from then on, I kind of focused on, okay, I'm going to work with youth in some capacity. I didn't know what that was going to look like or how that was going to be. And then I had some exposure to working with youth in Amsterdam. I just did a couple of trips there and was working with this group, and it was a little bit more like out in the community and talking and working with people in the community and out on the streets rather than kind of like formally like in a church setting or anything like that. And I found that I had a lot of passion for that. And then I was really fortunate because this organization called The Dam approached me in 2003 and was like, hey, would you come and consider working here? And so that's how it started. In November 2003, I went to work at this little grassroots organization called The Dam in Mississauga, and I've been there ever since.
Wow. And so, you mentioned in there that for youth, it can seem like the biggest things that they're going through, lots of pressure, lots of turmoil. And was there a big thing going on in your life that made you passionate, or was it just you just loved working with them?
Yeah, at that time, there probably was some big stuff going on in my life. Again, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I would have been like 20, 21 years old or somewhere around there. And I tended to have some turmoil in my own life for sure. Tended to be a pretty intense and passionate person, and was often caught up in the consequences of my own choices that I was making. And certainly that time in my life was no different. So I do think that the call to work with youth also ended up kind of being a grounding moment in my life, where I think also wanted to focus my own life and feel like there was more purpose. And I think that it did help me kind of root myself a little bit more, and like I said, and ground myself, kind of bringing myself out of a place that tended to be pretty tumultuous, and lots of waves and lots of storms, and often of my own making. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you said really two great words in there, grounding and purpose. And I mean, I reflect on my youth years, even, after high school. It's so hard to find your purpose. I feel like people at that age were chasing, were trying to find validation. What would you say? How do I word this? Because you're finding, that your passion is to work with youth. Would you say that is your purpose? And that's what really, or were you on your road to try to find your purpose?
Yeah, I think that I needed to find that purpose of working with youth at that moment in my life. And I certainly would say that it still is a purpose. It tends to be when I start talking about working with youth and the ins and outs of that I get pretty passionate. And so that's a sign that I probably still love what I do, and I do. I think that I have a incredible opportunity to be able to basically spend my life trying to build positive friendships with teenagers. It's just a wicked way to be able to spend my time. But I think that it shifts too, and that's okay. I think that trying to, like, being a 17-year-old and thinking I need to find my one ultimate purpose right now is pretty huge. And I don't know if that would help ease the storms of feeling like everything matters so much and everything is so important and so intense right now. I think rather that it's kind of about what's going to help you take the next step forward. Because I think that sometimes I would feel like, okay, this is the move that I need to make. And then I would be on my way towards that destination, and then there would be something that shifted it. And so it would look different than I thought, or, you need to divert down a different road. And that's okay. I think that sometimes we can get caught up thinking, oh, well, I had real clarity of vision at this moment, and so I need to stick with that forever. Well, it might be that clarity of vision was just to get us, these 5 next steps down the road, and then there was going to be something else to nudge us in another direction. So, I don't know if I would encourage a 17-year-old to find your ultimate purpose today for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
As much as, it's just about listening to the hearts of the youth that I work with, and finding out what are they passionate about today? What is the thing that's going to help them get out of bed today? What's the thing that's going to help them make a next choice for this next season of their life, or the next few months of their life, and finding some purpose there. I tend to be a pretty future focused or future driven type of a person, so I think that it's important for me to bring things back to today, and to bring things back to the present, and to find purpose for the present, and to find, that next word, or that next, intuition that's going to bring me through today, or through the next few steps, rather than thinking too big or too broadly.
I mean, I love that. I would echo that, and just, it's great to think of your future and not to fear your future and have those goals. But all we have is right now. Someone in my life has really reminded me of that. And he'll say okay, welcome to the now. That's all we have is right now. So how do you want to live right now? And that really helps center and ground me. And I love that, especially for young people where there are a lot of pressures on your shoulders. There's a lot of expectations and a lot of standards, I think, that can make youth feel like they have to figure out their purpose for the rest of their life when they're so young, when they're just starting out. And I love how you said just one next step. That's all you really need to focus on, because it will lead to the outcome.
The State of Potentiality will return after this short message.
Did you know there's a community of State of Potentiality listeners? Just search the State of Potentiality on Facebook and join our group for more inside inspiration along with practical, tangible tips to help you grow every day. You'll get the opportunity to give us live feedback and tell us what you'd like to hear about next. We'd love to connect with you. Just search the State of Potentiality on Facebook. Now, back to the episode.
I want to just learn more about your personal life and just, you said something really profound. You said nudge you in a different direction. I think all of us, no matter where we are at in our life, we had a plan and it didn't go according to the plan, or we had an expectation and then a different opportunity came that we didn't think was going to be there. So what is something that happened in your life where you were nudged in a different direction, or something unexpected happened that could have been horrible or just hard, but it led you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things I can talk about there, but I sometimes we're nudged in a different direction, and sometimes there's an explosion, or you really get knocked in a different direction, and certainly that's what happened to me about almost 6 years ago. Already, I didn't really have to be too future focused at the time because it just kind of all seemed like it was going according to plan, and a plan that I rather liked. I'm working at the dam and working with youth, and I was married and I had 3 kids, and I didn't really want or need anything more than that. That felt good, and I really liked it, and. I'll be careful with what I say about my ex-partner because a lot of that is her story and she's been through a lot on her own. But almost about 6 years ago, she started recovering some pretty significant memories of trauma that led down a very, very dark and scary road. Even led to a period of time where she was considering taking her own life. And so anyway, in very short order, or at least it felt so, I went from like kind of having this life where everything was pretty predictable and comfortable and nice and all of that type of stuff to kind of being like the main caregiver for my partner. And almost pretty much spending every day feeling like everything I said and everything that I did had to like convince her that life was worth living and that life was okay and that, she should stick around and be. Anyway, all of that said, she got through those very difficult and darkest days, which was wonderful. That was about 9 months that were so tough and tumultuous, and my work was great because obviously I couldn't be as available as I normally was, and I was trying to spend my time caring for my partner and then trying to make life as consistent and stable for my kids as I could while experiencing something like that, and had my parents and some other good community around us that helped me do that. But in a moment like that, you don't really have time to kind of like, or at least I didn't feel like I had time to kind of think, oh, well, what impact is this having on me? What's the effect of all of this? Am I okay? What outlets am I using to make sure that I'm going to stay healthy through this? Because you're just, in that moment, you're just kind of surviving. And you're just kind of doing what you need to do to make sure everybody is okay. And that was kind of the role in my life in that moment, are the people that I love okay? And what do I need to do so that they are okay, and to be the one to take care of everyone and to take care of everything and to make sure everything is okay. And I was happy to do it. It was very, very difficult. Those are some of the most difficult days of my life. but I was happy to do it because these are the people you love, and you do what you need to do. But coming out the other side of that, I mean, nothing was the same. And essentially, while I was trying very hard not to lose my partner, like in reality, and make sure that she stayed alive, ultimately it did mean that I lost my partner anyway, emotionally and in terms of connectivity and all of that. I mean, our relationship stopped being a reciprocal one, where you have a partner who, you meet each other's emotional needs and care for one another and are tender towards one another. Anyway, it's been a long, strange road, but now I'm in a position where we're separated, and my partner has bought a house of their own, and I'm only spending half of my time with my kids, who at one time were my whole world. So yeah, I mean, things don't always go according to plan, or kind of like stay the way that you think they're gonna stay. And oftentimes that's not your fault, or not necessarily anybody's fault. But yeah, definitely things happen. And then through that, of course, I've entered into a whole new journey, because all of that meant lots of trauma and anxiety for me that has required loads of unpacking after the fact. So sometimes you're nudged in another direction, and sometimes it's a little more dramatic than that.
Yeah, it does sound like an explosion, like you said. And I like how you said it wasn't your fault, because I think a lot of things happen outside of our control that we didn't choose. They happened to us. And when we were chatting, you mentioned Dr. Nicole's book, How to Do the Work. And I've read that. I apply it to the work that I do. It is such a powerful book to understand your own trauma, to understand who you actually are. And I mean, it's an awful feeling, and it's a very hardship when you did plan your life with someone and all of that unravels. But it sounds like, okay, you took care of your kids. It sounds like you love being a dad, which is awesome. But it sounded like you had, well, what I believe is that when someone in your family steps into healing, it is sometimes a domino effect, where it opens up the chance for you to do some healing. It's not always comfortable. It's usually very painful at the beginning. But how did you end up taking care of yourself through this process?
Yeah, well, I think that I probably didn't at the beginning, and just kind of like put your head down and do. And I think so for the first while that certainly was it. And then creates another explosion. I think that this is not all that uncommon for people, maybe particularly in their 30s and 40s, where some of their automatics and some of the ways of being and doing that we got used to, and patterns that we even built up in our childhood. Anyway, those coping mechanisms start to fail. And things that not only that recently happened to us, because for sure I had to unpack that specific trauma from more recent times, but that's just going to connect back to stuff from childhood and stuff from wherever that we also need to unpack. And we all have it. And it doesn't mean that we had bad parents. We just all have it. And yeah, I certainly hit a wall where suddenly I just felt so disconnected and so lonely. And so terribly alone. And I was like, man, this cannot continue this way. And when it became clear that the marriage I was in, that relationship was not going to find a place of healing and mending, and I certainly tried far longer than perhaps I should have, although it is what it is. You have to find other means and mechanisms to say, what do I need in order for me to be okay? because the answer to that is typically not going to be something external. It's not going to be a relationship. It's not going to be someone else. It's not going to be, moving to another city. It's not, like some of these external changes that where we're like, oh, I need a fresh start. It might work for a while, but when there's stuff there that needs to be dealt with, it's going to find ways to creep up and creep up and creep up until we finally find a path towards healing. So Dr. Nicole's book has certainly been helpful. I started by going to see a therapist, which was great, and I still see her, and that's been really wonderful and healing for me as well. I went to one person and it wasn't a fit, and that's okay. I've went to another person and I was like, yeah, this feels good, and she's lovely, and that's been a wonderful relationship. But it was actually just this past summer that I was reading Dr. Nicole's book, and I stumbled across the chapter, I believe that's called Trauma Body, or Body Trauma, or I think it's Trauma Body. And it talks about the polyvagal theory. And, it's interesting because I'm a social worker, and you read all of this kind of stuff, and you certainly know how to apply some of these lessons of healing, and are able to talk or speak into other people's lives or listen to them about the stuff that's going on with them. But sometimes we learn these lessons about ourselves the hardest, or it takes us the longest. But I'm just reading about the polyvagal theory and about how trauma can just subconsciously throw us into a state, a sympathetic state, it's called, where we're just not able to connect relationally, but in other ways as well. And as I'm reading this chapter, I'm just going, oh man, this is exactly what's happening to me. Like I am the trauma that I've experienced keeps throwing me back into this state where I just am unable to connect in the ways that I want to connect. It was really poignant and really helpful for me. And to go back to something that you said, I think that a big key to that was that in that chapter, it just is very specific about talking about how subconscious this is, and how it's something that's happening to us, and therefore something that is not our fault, something that we're not, to blame for. And I think in some ways I had to embrace the fact that I had experienced trauma in a fuller way that would allow me to think of it that way. This is something that's happening to me. This is something that I don't have control over necessarily. There's lots of things we can control, and I can talk about that. But like that, being thrown into a state where I'm finding it difficult to connect, and difficult to connect with people who I love so much. Like some of my favorite people in this whole world, and I'm just finding it so difficult to actually bridge that gap and connect with them. To realize that was my trauma, and that's what was happening to me, actually was really freeing. Because I think up to that point I was experiencing some of that stuff and going, what the heck is wrong with me? What's my problem? Like lots of self-blame and lots of shame and lots of, like just thinking I am crazy. Like I do not understand what's going on with me. I can't trust my own thoughts. I can't trust my own feelings. So this was actually really freeing, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening to me. And having an understanding of that then opened the door to the place where I'm like, there's something I can do about this.
Wow, that's great. And you said so many key things there. And I think it's, okay, you realize that something was disconnected. And that starts, I think so many people ask those questions. Okay, what's wrong with me? What happened to me? Or, what I like to do is change it, because nothing is wrong with you. Something did happen to you. But I think it starts with those swirling questions of like, is there a point to this? Why am I feeling so down? Like we start to ask ourselves things. And I love that you, even though it was difficult, even though it was probably extremely lonely and painful, you still allowed this to be a place for you to do the inner healing, for you to really learn about yourself. And now you're in a place where you're feeling that freedom. Was there a big shift that happened where you were just like, wow, this is all worth it, or this is why I had to do this? I mean, it's a long process. I'm someone who went through trauma a lot, and now I'm coaching people who are going through trauma and just wanting to step into their future, wanting to step into the now so they can enjoy life. And I know how long of a process it is, but was there, if you could take away like 1 to 3 big shifts that just happened in you to just really show people, okay, this is worth it to go through this?
Yeah, I think in some ways I feel like I'm still in process. I mean, especially since it was just in the summer that I really was digging into the book. I mean, I was doing some work before that, certainly going to therapy and certainly doing some things. But I think that one of the things that occurred during the summer that was really key for me was that my ex-partner and I were still sharing a lot of space. I don't know if you know about the housing market, but it's pretty wild.
I know, I'm not going to be owning a house till I'm 50.
So, I mean, living in Mississauga in a very expensive market, and then thinking about, okay, how do you separate, and how do you, create the possibility where you own 2 separate homes and 2 places for your kids. And I just always thought, man, it's just not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. So we were spending time away from the house, and the kids were staying there, and we were trying to work that out. But then with COVID and all of that, there were just so many moments where things got locked down. Neither of us wanted to be away from the kids. We ended up just spending so much time together still. And I did not realize how damaging that was to me. And really, in some ways, like, she's not toxic, but that relational dynamic became toxic to me. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen with trauma, and especially the type of trauma that she experienced, where there was lots of stuff that was being projected onto me through her trauma that was very difficult for me and made me see myself through the eyes of hurt and pain and fear and trauma. That was very difficult, because I think that it made me see myself. It made me see myself as someone to be feared, or it made me see myself as someone who couldn't be loved the way that I was. All of these different things, and I don't blame my ex-partner for this. She went through so much, and was dealing with her own unconscious stuff. But in the summer, we really started the process of separating completely. And not being in the same space anymore. And I was very intentional about setting some new boundaries, which was so incredibly helpful for me. It felt like a detox in some ways. Being able to step out from under that, being able to not be in this space anymore, where I kept being reminded of, partially what I'd lost, but also just seeing myself through eyes that, in the end, I believe couldn't see me anymore, and they saw their trauma, and then I was seen through that filter. And I just wasn't being seen, and that was extremely hard, and it made me difficult for me to love myself in that space. I often felt worthless. I felt unlovable. I felt all of these different things, and all of those were triggers for that trauma. So all of that to say, I think that the first thing was I had to put myself in a situation where I was decreasing my exposure to the things that were triggering my trauma. So that became one thing that I had control over. Which was so key and so helpful in coming out kind of from under that. I think number 2 was dealing with some of the childhood wounds that obviously way predated my partner, but certainly had to do with some of my ability to embrace loving myself in a new way. And so, like, I remember taking a walk one morning, and I stopped by this lake that's near my house, I mean, it still sounds cheesy, but I don't care. I told myself that I love myself. I was just, like, out loud, I was just like, I love you. And I think that was the first time in my whole life that I had done that. But that's actually become a regular practice for me, where every morning I kind of say a message of self-love to myself. Because I had an experience with my therapist where I was supposed to connect with my inner child and like, can you love this kid just as they are, without them needing to change? And the first time I had that experience, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I never believed that I was lovable just the way I was. I had a childhood that was full of getting in trouble. It feels like my whole childhood was getting in trouble. Got in trouble all the time. So I viewed myself through those eyes. And so now, building up those pieces of being like, you know what? I'm awesome. Like, I'm a really, really great dude. Has been really, really remarkable. So that's been number 2, dealing with some of those childhood wounds and just embracing self-love in a new way. Yeah. And then I would say number 3 is just building up some other practices, mindfulness practices, meditation, distress tolerance practices for it. Like, so if I do end up feeling like my trauma has been triggered, or if I do enter into a state of a little bit more anxiety, that there's things that I can do to get myself back online. That's the other thing I have control of, right? I might not have control of, my trauma creeping up or anxiety, poking its head out of the water. But then I do have control of what do I do with that now? Yeah. So I can have some practices to do that. Setting intentions in my day of what I'm going to do and what I'm going to practice, and some bigger intentions too, just about how I want to show up in the world and how I want to embody my own life. This is my journey. This is the only life I get to live. So I want to live it my way, and I want to live it with joy, and I want to live it with peace, and I want to live it, with lots and lots of love. And so I need to set intentions to make sure that I'm entering every day, reminding myself that that's how I want to live. And all of those things have been incredibly, incredibly helpful. And in some ways, it feels like waking up. But in other ways, I'm embracing life in a newer, fuller way than I ever did before. So it's not like getting my old self back. It really is a journey of building a new me.
Wow. So lots of things there. And I can see how it is a process. And I say loving yourself is a lifelong journey. It's not like it all happens overnight and then you've got everything you need to keep carrying on. It's setting that intention. And, there's a lot of pieces you talked in here too about self-awareness. Like, you're gaining more awareness of yourself. And, in our childhood, many of us, we learn to give up ourselves in order to receive love in many different ways. And so loving ourselves as adults can seem really weird, or it can just seem hard, impossible, or cheesy. How do I love myself? And you also said, okay, there are people in your life projecting fear, and then it triggered you. And honestly, one of the best things you can do is learn to love yourself in this way, because then you start not projecting your own trauma and hurt and pain onto others. And then when you do notice that someone else is doing that, it's like, okay, that's not personal. I'm not putting that on myself, because you're loving yourself. And it does take a lot of hard work. And it's, even as you're saying, oh, I love my life and I want this to happen. For so long, I believed, if I do that, or if I say that, or if I give myself permission to love my life, I'm being selfish. But that's the key, though, is that it's not selfish. You're not saying it in a way of like, oh my goodness, this is my life, but you're embracing the now. And the key thing is you're loving yourself, and you're able to then go on and love others in a different way. I'm sure you're showing up to work differently. You're showing up with your kids. And this is what I want to talk to you about now, is just, it sounds, again, that you love being a dad, and you're pouring so much love into your kids. And I would love to just to talk about a little bit about being a single dad and navigating through that, but also just giving hope to other people out there who are single parents going through similar things like this. What can you share to them about navigating through this as well?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm going to back up for 2 seconds just to reiterate something that you said about it not being selfish, because I do think that for me, one of my natural ways of being is just to be so protective of the people who I love and care for. And I think, well, I don't think, I know that it's true that walking through trauma and anxiety and not doing the things that I needed to do to care for myself, my hurt starts to hurt others. I mean, certainly that happened to me, where the hurt of my partner at the time spilled over, and that pain expands and spreads. And that was starting to happen for me too, where with my kids, but certainly with other people in my life that I love, you could just see that it was hurting them. My pain, my brokenness, my inability to show up the way that I wanted to when my trauma was triggered. And so I think that one of the things that really compelled me forward into this journey was like, I want to be able to show up for the people who I love the most. And I'm not doing that right now. And I'm hurting some of the people that I love the most. So that was a real impetus, and one of the big things that drove me forward into this journey of healing was because it's not just selfish. Taking time for me, loving myself, that helps me show up in the lives of the other people that I love too.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure, that's also going to mean my kids. Kids they're incredible. And I love all the ways that my kids have also cared for me. My son has such a big heart, and he would see when I wasn't doing well, and I could probably expect a big hug or a cuddle or how's it going, Dad, which is great. And my oldest daughter would just sit with me and play her guitar, and I mean, I would just take so much joy and pleasure in that, and it was incredible. And then my youngest child is just such a firecracker, and they're always bringing lots of exuberance and laughter and fun. And I think that somehow, and this might be providence, that I was able to, through all of this, I think, show up decently as a dad and still care for and love them through all of this. But I definitely think that engaging this journey has made that so much better, where my moments of frustration have decreased, my ability to respond rather than react in relationship to them has been great. And I think that one thing I will say is that some of the fears that I had, because I think that one of the things that was stopping me from moving forward was that I did not want to lose half of my time with my kids.
Yeah.
And so I would say that one of the things that I've discovered is it's not as bad as I thought that it was going to be. And the reason that it's not as bad as I thought that it was going to be is because those boundaries that I've put in place, again, have just been so healing and so positive that now that half of the time that I do have with my kids, I'm showing up in a better space. I'm showing up as a better me. I'm showing up, with a lot more capacity to engage. So, I mean, I don't know what it's like to single parent entirely. I think during the time when my partner was really ill and really not doing well was probably the biggest taste that I got of that. I mean, what I'm doing now is co-parenting, and sometimes that can be even trickier because there's all of this communication that needs to happen back and forth. But navigating that well and just making sure to to always keep respect at the forefront and care for the other person and using lots of patience and using all of those skills to show up well so that communication is going well. And then just making sure to connect very specifically. And I've had some of these tools as a dad from the beginning, because you're right. I freaking love being a dad.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing in the world. So since my kids started kindergarten, I made sure that twice a school year, I pull each of them out of school individually, and we spend a day together. So
That's awesome.
well, I have a great job that allows me to take mental health days. So I get one a month, and I use 6 of them to spend time with one of my kids.
That's so
for the
cool.
whole day. They get to pick where lunch is. They get to anyway. I mean that obviously is a big example of what you're trying to do on a micro level each day. Do I take time today to connect with my kids? Did I take a moment, at least a moment, to be there? And as they become older and teenagers, because they're 16, almost 14, and 11 now, it can seem like, oh, they need less time with me, or they don't want to connect, or they want some time on their own. And that's true. They can have some time on their own. But teenagers, and I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, so teenagers don't need less time with the people who love and care and care about them. We need connection just as much. And I mean, my 16-year-old is obviously now old enough to come to the drop-in where I work, and so she shows up there, and we hang out there too, which is so fun. And a group of her friends show up there, and I get that extra bonus now too of hanging out with my daughter at work. Which is so great. But it also shows that that's a safe space for her, and lots of different ways that my kids show lots of signs that they at least were able to form a strong, healthy attachment. And that's going to make a big difference, because I have no doubt that my kids are going to need to unpack some shit as they get older, because they've gone through stuff that I certainly never had to go through when I was a kid, and witnessed stuff that I never had to witness. I don't spend too much time worrying about that, because it's going to come whether I worry about it or not. So, but yeah, they're going to have their own journeys, and they're going to have to unpack what some of that has meant for them. So, I mean, my job is to still kind of like add and create that foundation, so that, if a day comes where they're struggling with their own anxiety or their own fears, or, their mental health deteriorates, or something presents itself in their mental health in a specific way, that they'll know they have a safe place to come and a safe foundation to come to. That there's nothing that's out of bounds or off limits. That's probably something that I learned in my childhood. There were just things that felt like they were taboo or bad or wrong. And so if you were dealing with those things, you're not going to talk about them, or at least I wasn't. I just hid them away, or felt bad, or just let them add to my shame monster. That was buried inside of me. But instead being like, this is a safe space, whatever's going on, whatever you need to talk to, you have questions. This is my problem. I have like my kids have a very safe space where they could come to talk about sex, for example, so they don't want to, right?
Okay.
They're like, nah, don't think I want to talk to my dad about that. But they know that if they ever need to, I'm there, and nothing's off limits, and nothing's out of bounds. Talk to me. Let's have a conversation. You're in trouble, come to me. This is something that for my kids is also for any youth that I've ever mentored. I am never going to be disappointed in you.
Yeah.
That is one of the best things I think that I can do for others. Like, no matter what you're going through, even if you said, oh, I'm going to stop doing this, and you've said it 5 weeks in a row, and on week 6, you're still doing, that specific thing, I'm not going to be disappointed in you. My job is just to be here on your journey and encourage you, and help you, towards the goals that you've set for yourself. And so if that takes 15 tries, if that takes 25 tries, if it takes 100 tries, I'm still going to be in your corner cheering for you. I think
awesome.
that's one of the best gifts I can give.
That's awesome. And, just echoing what you said before, this is just, the way you connect with yourself is the way you connect with others. And that's how the safe place and the safe haven can be just kind of grown. And I love that. And I also just want to thank you for doing the work as a dad. I'm not a parent, but I've been a child where I grew up with separated parents, and I know how difficult it can be, but I know how amazing it can be when a parent does do the work on themselves, because it impacts the children, and it impacted me in such a powerful way growing up. So thank you for doing that. And what I want to just ask you before we wrap up, Ken, is just, okay, you've talked about loving yourself. You've talked about doing the inner healing, just really owning up to just you're feeling disconnected, you're feeling lonely. And the thing is that there seems to be so many resources for women on these topics of, oh, there's so many movements for women to feel empowered, to love themselves, to love their body, et cetera, et cetera. But as a man, this can kind of, I don't know, I've talked to a variety of different men, and it's a hard topic for them to even embrace because, there's such this stigma or stereotype for men to be the tough one, to be the one that is the grounded one. And I agree with that. But at the same time, getting in touch with your emotions is also such a powerful tool that both men and women can do in their life. So can you just share some advice for men in this direction of loving yourself, doing the inner healing, and how it's so needed for men, not just women?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're on the cusp of November here, Movember, where certainly men's mental health comes into the spotlight, and it's so key because we know the amount of men who are struggling with depression, anxiety, trauma, and way too many, obviously, tragically ending up suiciding at rates that are higher than women. And yeah, I think it's true that so much of that stems from the fact that we have been taught to repress. And that growing up, maybe the only emotions that get normalized for men are anger and neutrality. You can't be too happy. You can't be too sad. You can't be, any of those types of things. You can't be too angry either, but at least people seem to understand anger in men. It's like, yeah, like I said, it's normalized, if not healthy. Yeah, I do think that a lot of the resources and stuff out there tend to be geared towards women, and that may just be because that community is so made up of women who are willing to talk about these things and share these things. And it might be that side to us, is more of that feminine side, and that we need to kind of like tear down the walls so that men can explore some of their softer side. And allow some of that femininity to embrace us. As I entered into your apartment here, and you were apologizing about the girly nature of your furniture, and I was just thinking, so what? This is your apartment, like put in it what you love, and I'm fine. I don't need to sit in a manly chair in order to feel comfortable and be present. I do think that there is some work for us, but I think that the message to a lot of guys is maybe the message to a lot of us, which is you're not alone. You're not alone. I think that there is just such a deep feeling of loneliness and disconnection, which is part of what I talked about before. And that it takes a lot of courage to reach out and find those people in our life who are going to help us realize we're not alone. There are so many people out there who we can connect with. And there's lots of guys out there who we can connect with. But it is tricky where a lot of male friendships might start with, oh, well, we play video games together, or we play poker together, we, do these activities together. But where do we actually start to breach that wall that says, let's connect in a different way? I got a buddy named Henry, who taught me this lesson in high school. And it was one of the best lessons that I think I ever learned, where we were hanging out at what we called the curb at that time, and lots of skateboarders used to hang out there and do whatever. And he was like, "Yo, man, you want to go for a walk?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's go for a walk." And we went for a walk around the lake that was near the place where we grew up, and he just started talking. He was like, "Man, sometimes I just don't know. I feel so sad, and I don't know what to do with my sadness, and it's just like there." And I'm like, "What do I do with this? And is there something wrong with me?" Anyway, he kind of broke that wall, right? And I was like, "Whoa, this is dope. I really like this. Like, what is this? And so I was able to, chat with him too, and kind of like talk about some deeper things. And I think that I've been really lucky that throughout my life since then, I've had friends, both male and female, where that wall gets broken down. That might not be a lot of people. Like we might be people who have a lot of friends, and probably out of that lot of friends, there is that handful who we can break that wall down with. And I think that the mistake that a lot of us make as young men is that we think that we need to remain strong in our friendships. Like, oh, I need to seem tough. I need to seem like I have it together. We make fun of each other all the time. I want to be the person who ends up on top of that. I think I was always pretty good at that, like, oh, I've got a cunning tongue and can, be sarcastic or witty or make the better joke about my friend. But that doesn't always create a safe space. And in fact, I think that when we think that we always need to remain strong in a friendship, that actually means that friendship's pretty weak. A friendship is strong when we can bring our weakness to it. When we can say, "Yo, I'm not always okay. I need support. I need a listening ear." And I'm very lucky that I have a couple of incredible sisters. I've got an amazing mom and dad who are part of my support network, and that makes all the difference. But then I also have a few of those friends who that wall has been broken, and we are able to be weak with one another. And no matter what I bring into that space, I know what I'm going to find is care and love and support, and that makes all the difference. I know that I'm not alone.
Yeah. That's huge. And I love that. And that, when we connect with ourselves, we have to be vulnerable and honest with ourselves. And then that allows us to then go to our friends and be like, "Hey, I am struggling with this." And I think women, when we get together, we talk about our emotions a lot. We do. And I'll have a girlfriend over where we'll do nothing but sit on the couch and just talk about what we're actually struggling with, to find that common ground, to support each other and hold that emotional space. But I think it's so key as a man to know that you can do that in your friendships as well. And when you have even just one friend to do that with, that's where, the inner healing also, starts, and that you're not alone and that you can actually talk to your friends about this. So I love that, Ken. Thank you so much. Just thank you for being here and sharing your story so openly, so honestly. And for those who are just going through similar things, maybe they know people who are going through similar things, or maybe they're just still processing some of this stuff. You've mentioned boundaries. You mentioned setting intentions. If there's one intention you could tell someone to just set today, what would it be?
Whoa, that's a big question. One intention to set for today.
We try to give people bite-sized pieces so they can take it away. So
yeah, for sure.
An example of an intention.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to do one thing, I might as well take it from the bits and pieces that I've already talked about. And since I went into this one a little bit more in detail, I'll say, if you're going to do one thing today, set one intention for today, I would say spend some time telling yourself that you love yourself and really internalizing that and really kind of speaking to the core of who you are, trying to embrace the entirety of who you are and saying, "I love you."
Awesome. Okay, Ken, thank you so much. I'm so excited for people to hear your story and for people to learn from you. And I just cheer you on. I cheer you on as a dad, as someone who's working in youth, and then just in your own personal life. Awesome.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
Thanks for listening to the State of Potentiality podcast, where we share stories of overcoming adversity each episode. If this episode resonated with you, click the follow button and share the story with 3 friends, or give us a review on iTunes. You can now join our Facebook group to get more insight, inspiration, and practical, tangible tips to help you grow every day. Just search for The State of Potentiality. As always, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook, as well as our website, www.stateofpotentiality.ca. Remember, friends, it is what it is. Make something good.